She thought it was just another sunny day on the cliffs of Monterey Bay. But when Juliana Moore stepped out of her Range Rover, a pair of overpriced baby shoes nestled in her purse and hope fluttering in her chest, the world she knew began to crumble. The sold signs stabbed the earth like a blade. Her dream home, gone. The nursery she'd painted in earth tones, the life she'd built brick by brick, all of it vanished behind a locked door and a changed key. And then came the man she loved, Daniel Westbrook, emerging from a black Rolls-Royce like a ghost, his smile erased, replaced with cruel indifference. At his side, a woman in a crimson dress, a symbol of betrayal, pregnant, alone, erased. What began as a betrayal would soon ignite a war. One woman, one unborn child, and a powerful rival who would rise from the shadows, not just to defend her, but to dismantle the empire that tried to destroy her. This wasn't just a scandal. It was an uprising. And Juliana Moore? She was done being collateral damage. The key wouldn't turn. That was the first sign for Juliana Moore. Her life in the sun-drenched cliffs of Monterey Bay had felt like a dream. A sprawling villa, a striking husband, Daniel Westbrook, and a baby on the way. She thought she had it all. But that Tuesday afternoon, standing in front of her own front door, with a useless piece of brass in hand, she realized her dream was nothing but an elaborate illusion. The house wasn't just locked, it was gone. Sold. And the man she loved, the father of her unborn son, was the one who'd done it. He left her homeless, pregnant, and with nothing but the designer shoes on her feet. Her breath caught in her throat. A chill swept up her spine, despite the California warmth that bathed the hills in gold. She blinked at the door, then at the key, willing the lock to work, as if her desperation alone could undo the betrayal. It couldn't. Tears stung her eyes but didn't fall. Not yet. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the doorknob again, foolishly hoping the key had just slipped. But no. It was final. Cold. Locked. Sold. The key slipped from her fingers, landing with a metallic clink on the slate steps. The sound was small, but it echoed like a gavel in her mind. A verdict. A sentence. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was the collapse of everything she trusted. And her salvation would come from the most unexpected and powerful man in San Francisco. The California sun had a way of making everything seem flawless. It glazed the marble columns of the Westbrook estate, made the still water of the cliffside pools shimmer, and stretched long shadows from the olive trees lining the driveway. For Juliana Moore, this view had been her life for 5 years. She had married Daniel Westbrook, the magnetic heir of Westbrook Capital, a man whose grin was as polished as his Rolex. Their days were a blur of charity auctions, weekend getaways to Sonoma, and quiet evenings debating between Michelin-starred takeout. Juliana, the gifted art curator, had shelved her rising career to focus on what she thought was more meaningful: family. At 30, she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a boy. The nursery was nearly finished: soft earth tones, a custom crib, and a hand-painted mural of redwoods. She'd spend hours in there, folding baby clothes, one hand resting protectively on her swelling belly. Each tiny sock, each folded onesie was a whispered promise. A life she'd imagined with Daniel, a life that was supposed to begin, not end. She'd talk to the baby sometimes, voice low and tender, telling him about the redwoods and the sea, about how much he was loved. She had believed in it all so completely. But lately something had shifted. A draft had crept into her perfect world. It wasn't just the breeze slipping in through some unseen crack. It was Daniel, pulling away. Always ambitious, yes, but now he came home late, smelling like aged scotch and a floral scent that wasn't hers. His explanations, client dinners, strategy sessions, felt thinner each time. The phone he used to leave on the dresser was now always in his pocket, screen turned down. "Just a big deal, Jules," he'd said last night, not quite looking her in the eyes. "It's taking everything I've got," Daniel had told her, his voice tight. "But it'll be worth it. For us. For the baby." Juliana had wanted to believe him, desperately. She chalked up her unease to pregnancy hormones, to nesting instincts making her overly sensitive. That Tuesday she'd gone for her routine checkup with her obstetrician. Dr. Morgan Patel, a kind, steady woman, had shown her the baby's heartbeat on the monitor. Thump, thump, thump. The sound cut through her storm of doubts like a lighthouse in fog. Anchored by hope, she'd stopped at a boutique in downtown Carmel and bought a tiny pair of gray sneakers. Ridiculously overpriced. And perfect. Pulling her white Range Rover into the winding driveway at 3 p.m., she hummed along to a jazz tune on the radio, until she saw it. A red sign was staked into the lawn just past the row of perfectly clipped lavender bushes. Sold. At first, she blinked. Thought maybe it was a prank, some tasteless joke from one of Daniel's rich friends. She parked the car, her heart thudding in an erratic rhythm that clashed with her baby's earlier steady beat. She walked to the sign, reaching out to touch its smooth, sterile surface. Sold by Mason and Kent Realty. She didn't recognize the agency. A cold wave of nausea washed over her, worse than any morning sickness. Her hands shook as she fumbled in her purse for the keys. She climbed the stone steps, ones she had walked 1,000 times. She slid the key into the lock. It didn't turn. Tried again. Nothing. The lock had been changed. Panic clawed up her throat. She rang the doorbell. The familiar chime echoed from somewhere deep inside the silent house. No answer. She pounded on the door. "Daniel?" Her voice came out thin, uncertain. "Is anyone home?" She grabbed her phone to call him. That's when the low purr of a car engine rose behind her. She turned. A black Rolls-Royce Ghost glided up the drive, coming to a smooth stop behind her SUV. The driver's door opened, and there was Daniel. Impeccably dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, he looked like a cover model for a luxury magazine, but his face was blank, emotionless. Then the passenger door opened and a woman stepped out. She was tall, breathtaking, with sleek black hair and a poised, predatory elegance. Her crimson dress hugged every curve, the fabric practically shouting wealth and ruthless ambition. Juliana knew her, recognized her from a tech gala in Palo Alto months ago. Elena Cross, a notoriously cutthroat commercial real estate developer. Elena leaned casually against the rolls, a smirk stretching across her lips, smug and triumphant. As she glanced between Juliana and the villa, Juliana's voice cracked. "Daniel, what's going on?" she asked, barely able to breathe. "Why can't I get inside?" "What's that sign?" Daniel walked toward her, each step echoing in the heavy silence. He didn't look at her belly, he didn't even meet her eyes. He stared just over her shoulder. "The house is sold, Juliana," he said flatly. His voice was hollow, distant, a stranger's voice. "Sold?" she repeated, the word tasting like ash on her tongue. "What do you mean, sold? This is our home, the nursery, our babies." "It was never yours," he cut her off sharply. "It was mine, a premarital asset. My lawyers ensured that was clear." The prenup, the one she had signed without hesitation, blinded by love and faith. Her father had warned her, always get your own legal counsel, but she'd waved it off as outdated cynicism. "But why?" she whispered, a tear breaking free, burning its way down her cheek. "We're having a baby, Daniel." Finally he looked at her, and what she saw chilled her blood. There was no love, no regret, only cold, calculated indifference. "Plans change," he said. "Elena and I are together now, we're moving forward." Elena pushed off the car and sauntered over, her arm looping possessively through Daniel's. She looked Juliana over with a slow, deliberate sneer, her gaze stopping at the swell of Juliana's belly with open distaste. "Don't look so surprised, darling," Elena said smoothly, her voice a weapon wrapped in silk. "You didn't really think a man like Daniel would stay tied down forever, did you? Some of us offer more than just domestic comfort." The insult hung thick in the air, choking. Juliana staggered a step backward. "My things? Our wedding photos? The baby's room?" Daniel didn't flinch. He pulled a business card from his wallet. "They're in storage," he said, like he was talking about logistics, not a life. "Details are here. My assistant will be in touch. About the divorce." He extended the card toward her, but her hands wouldn't move. Numb. "Generous," she echoed, barely audible. The betrayal washed over her, relentless. "You sold our home. You're leaving me," Juliana choked. "While I'm carrying your son? You're just throwing us away?" "Don't be so dramatic, Juliana," Daniel snapped, his polished mask finally cracking. "You're not the first woman to get divorced." He adjusted his cufflinks like he hadn't just shattered her entire world. "I've transferred $50,000 to your account," he added, his tone cold and detached. "That should be more than enough to get a place, get settled, before well, he couldn't even say baby. The word caught in his throat like an inconvenience, not a child. Juliana's breath caught. Her vision blurred as the weight of his apathy crashed into her. He was cutting ties, clean and surgical, as if she were some failed investment, not the mother of his son. "Get off the property, Juliana. The new owners are arriving soon. It's no longer your concern." And with that, he turned. Elena's arm curled tighter around his as they walked back toward the Rolls-Royce, heels clicking against the stone path. Neither of them looked back. They didn't look back as Juliana stood alone, pregnant, staring at the front door of a life that had just been erased. The sleek black car reversed, pivoted around the circular drive, and rolled down the sunlit street, leaving only a trace of exhaust and broken dreams. Juliana didn't move. The $50,000 settlement felt like 30 pieces of silver. Blood money, hush money, the price of betrayal. Just hours ago, the California sun had wrapped her world in gold. Now it mocked her. Without warning, the sky turned, and the first cold drop hit her shoulder. Then another. Then dozens. A sudden downpour soaked her hair, her blouse, her skin, her soul. Her silk shirt clung to her body, her belly, as she dropped to her knees. Her sobs broke free, mixing with the drumming of the rain. It wasn't just the cold. It was the emptiness. The brutal silence that followed the screech of a door closing forever. She clutched her belly as if to shield her son from the heartbreak. She didn't know how long she stayed there, crumpled on the wet asphalt, arms around her stomach, trembling with grief so sharp it felt like tearing. $50,000. In a city where even a one-bedroom cost a small fortune. It was a joke. A slap. The price Daniel had put on her, on their son. A number typed into a bank app. That's all they were to him now, an expense. Her Range Rover sat behind her, once a badge of luxury, now a cruel reminder of a life that no longer existed. Where could she even go? Her parents were gone, killed in a car crash 3 years ago. Her only blood relative was a distant cousin in Oregon she hadn't spoken to in a decade. She had friends, yes, but they weren't her friends. They were Daniel's. Couples who dined at private clubs and vacationed in the Alps. Going to them would only bring pity and whispers. Except for one, Chloe Jensen, her oldest friend, a sharp-tongued journalist with a spine of steel. Chloe had never liked Daniel, always said there was something under the charm, something dangerous. Juliana had laughed it off back then, too in love to listen. Now those warnings echoed louder than the rain. With trembling, rain-slick fingers, Juliana pulled out her phone. She found Chloe's name in her contacts and hit call. "Jules? You okay? You sound terrible." Chloe's voice was a lifeline. "He kicked me out," Juliana choked, the words spilling out between sobs. "He sold the house. He's with someone else. Elena Cross. I have nowhere to go." There was a pause, then a sharp string of profanity aimed squarely at Daniel. It was equal parts shocking and deeply comforting. "Where are you right now?" "In the driveway." "Stay in the car. Lock the doors. Text me the address. I'm coming. We'll figure this out." An hour later, Chloe's battered Honda Civic screeched into the driveway. She jumped out, her fiery red hair soaked, eyes fierce with purpose. She ran to Juliana's window and tapped on the glass. When Juliana unlocked the door, Chloe yanked it open and pulled her into a tight embrace, ignoring the rain, the mud, the fact that Juliana's designer blouse was soaked through. "We're going to destroy him," she said, voice low and steady. "Legally, publicly. I don't care. But first, we get you out of here." Chloe's apartment in Koreatown was a different universe from Monterey Bay. Small, chaotic, vibrant. Piles of books stacked in corners, half-finished articles strewn across the dining table, the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. And yet, for the next 2 weeks, it was Juliana's sanctuary. Chloe became a shield, blocking calls from Daniel's smug assistant, screening messages, protecting Juliana from the media storm outside. But even surrounded by warmth and loyalty, reality clawed at her. The $50,000 would run out fast. She needed a lawyer, an apartment, furniture, baby supplies. She was 6 months pregnant, visibly, and getting a job in her narrow, specialized field of art history, nearly impossible now. Every night, Juliana lay awake on Chloe's sofa bed, one hand resting on her belly, whispering quiet apologies to the baby growing inside her. Her name, once linked to museum boards and high society galas, was now tabloid fodder. The Whisper campaign had begun, expertly seeded by Daniel's PR machine. Juliana was unstable, emotionally volatile. Her pregnancy had made her erratic. Daniel, of course, was the long-suffering husband who had finally escaped. He was rewriting the story, turning himself into the victim. It was a lie, and it burned. One rainy Thursday, suffocating from the walls of Chloe's apartment, Desperate for a sliver of peace, Juliana slipped out to a small independent bookstore just a few blocks away. She needed to breathe, to be surrounded by stories not her own. She clutched an old paperback on Renaissance art, tucking it under her coat as she made her way home. Her umbrella barely held back the relentless rain. Her mind was far away, miles from Koreatown, from the rain, from her body. She was running numbers in her head, picturing courtroom battles, imagining Daniel and Alina in her home. She wasn't watching where she stepped. At the exact moment she stepped off the curb, a cyclist, head tucked down against the wind, veered to avoid a pothole. He slammed right into her. The impact knocked her backward. Her purse flew open, its contents skidding across the slick pavement. The book landed face down in a puddle. The tiny baby sneakers, her lucky charm, spun into the gutter. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," the cyclist said, scrambling to untangle himself from his bike. Juliana wasn't seriously hurt, just stunned. But the sight of those tiny soaked shoes, it was too much. All the fear, the anger, the heartbreak she'd kept bottled up surged to the surface. She tried to hold it in, but her throat clenched painfully, her breath hitched. She dropped to her knees on the filthy sidewalk, uncaring of the grime, the water, the judgment. Her body trembled as she sobbed openly, shoulders shaking beneath the weight of everything. The tears weren't just sadness, they were surrender. She had carried the burden of betrayal, of loneliness, of fear for her future and her babies, all by herself. And now, soaked to the skin on a city sidewalk, the weight of survival cracked her wide open. She barely registered the sound of approaching footsteps. Measured, deliberate, expensive. "Are you all right, miss?" a deep voice asked. Calm, grounded, cutting through the city's noise like a knife. Juliana looked up, brushing a mix of rain and tears from her cheeks. A man stood over her, holding a sleek black umbrella, shielding them both from the downpour. He was impossibly tall, dressed in a charcoal gray suit tailored so perfectly it looked sculpted to his frame. His features were sharp, his eyes dark and piercing, as if he could see the parts of her even she didn't want to acknowledge. There was something about him. Stillness, authority, quiet power. He looked like the kind of man who ran empires and found them boring. A black limousine idled at the curb. A chauffeur stood beside it, waiting in silence. I'm fine," she lied, fumbling for her things. Her hands were trembling too much. Without hesitation, the man knelt, his $1,000 trousers soaking up rain, and began gathering her scattered belongings. Her keys, her wallet, a lip balm rolling toward the street. Then he paused. His hand hovered over the tiny mud-smeared sneaker caught in the gutter. He picked it up with surprising care, turning it over in his palm like it was breakable. Then his eyes flicked from the shoe to her rounded belly. His expression shifted, just slightly. Recognition? Pity? Something she couldn't quite name. Whatever it was, it pierced her like a pin through silk. Clean, quiet, undeniable. "Let me help you," he said again, softer now. It wasn't a question. He reached out and steadied her, lifting her gently to her feet with a firm, steady grip. "Where are you going?" the man asked. "Just an apartment around the corner," Juliana mumbled, humiliated. Every inch of her was soaked, every piece of her life unraveling. And this impossibly powerful stranger was seeing her at her lowest. "You're drenched. You'll catch a cold," he said. "Let my driver take you." "No, I couldn't possibly." "I insist." He guided her gently toward the waiting black limousine. The chauffeur opened the door, revealing a luxurious interior lined in cream leather. It smelled like success, clean, refined, understated wealth. It was a world Juliana had once belonged to, but now felt completely foreign. She hovered at the threshold. "I don't even know your name," she said quietly. He studied her for a beat, dark eyes sharp but not unkind. "My name is Kai Carter." The name hit her like a slap. Kai Carter, not just a millionaire, the millionaire, the elusive founder of Carter Enterprises, a global tech and venture powerhouse. He was media-shy, strategically private, and Daniel used to talk about him with a mix of fear and disdain, calling him a calculating shark with no soul. He was the competition, a legend. "You're Kai Carter," she whispered. He gave a small nod, his face unreadable. Then he looked her over again, slower this time. "And you're Juliana Moore, Daniel Westbrook's wife." Her blood went cold. Of course he knew who she was. This wasn't chance, this wasn't kindness. Was this about Daniel? Was Kai here to gloat, to witness his rival's discarded wife at rock bottom? Ex-wife, she corrected, lifting her chin slightly. A flicker of strength returned to her voice. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Carter, but I can manage. She turned to go. But his next words froze her. Your father was David Moore, the art curator? She stopped, stunned, spun around. How do you know that? He gave me my first break, Kai said, his voice quieter now. An internship at the Modern Art Museum when I was just a broke college kid. No connections, no name. He saw something in me. He believed in me when no one else did. He paused, the memory softening his tone. I was sorry to hear about his death. Juliana blinked through the rain, speechless. Her father had mentored hundreds of students, but she'd never heard that story. The debt was his to give, Kai said, stepping closer, but the respect is mine to offer his daughter. He looked her straight in the eyes. Let me help you, not as Daniel's rival, but as someone who owes a good man. Let me get you home, and let me give you the name of my personal attorney. She's the best in the city. She'll make sure Daniel doesn't take one more thing from you. She looked up at this imposing figure, this so-called shark of the corporate world. But in Kai Carter's eyes, Juliana didn't see a predator. She saw something entirely unexpected, a powerful, unwavering ally. She thought of Chloe's tiny apartment, her vanishing savings, the cruel smirk on Elena's face, the tiny, mud-splattered baby shoe Kai still held gently in his hand. She had nothing left to lose. Juliana inhaled deeply, a breath that tasted of both surrender and fragile hope. Okay, Mr. Carter, she said quietly, I accept your help. As she stepped into the warm hush of the limousine, wrapped in silence and soft leather, she had no idea that this rain-soaked collision wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a war that would rattle the foundations of two of the city's most powerful families. The car slid through city streets like a shadow, impervious to traffic and noise. A silent chauffeur draped a cashmere blanket over Juliana's trembling shoulders. Across from her, Kai sat still, composed, watching the blur of headlights beyond the tinted glass. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was electric, with questions neither of them voiced. Juliana glanced at his reflection in the window, sharp, unreadable, untouchable. Yet she sensed something in him that mirrored her own buried pain, something he didn't let many people see. They didn't go back to Chloe's Koreatown walk-up. Instead, the limousine descended into a private, guarded underground garage beneath one of Century City's most elite skyscrapers, Carter Tower. His tower, his name gleaming on the lobby wall in brushed steel. Mr. Carter, this isn't where I live, Juliana said, her voice faltering. I know, he replied, finally turning toward her as the car eased to a stop. You can't fight a war from a refugee camp, Miss Moore. You need a fortress. Until you have your own, you'll use one of mine. Before she could argue, the elevator doors slid open behind him. He led her into a private lift, no buttons, just a keycard. And then into the penthouse. The doors opened into silence and grandeur. Juliana stepped out into a soaring space wrapped in glass. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles. The city glittered like diamonds spilled across black velvet. The furniture was modern and spare, arranged with effortless precision. A genuine Rothko hung over the fireplace. A Giacometti sculpture brooded near the balcony. It was elegance without excess, not gaudy, not a showpiece, a space of power. And yet, it wasn't cold. There was something about the place that felt lived in, intentional, like every detail served a purpose. It was nothing like Daniel's mansion, which screamed wealth. This whispered confidence. This is too much, Juliana whispered, overwhelmed. It's a temporary base of operations, Kai replied, already moving toward the kitchen, an art piece of stainless steel and marble. The kitchen's stocked. Concierge downstairs can handle anything, and security is absolute. No one gets in without my permission. You'll be safe here, you and your son. Kai said it with such calm authority, with such unwavering finality, that arguing felt pointless. He wasn't offering her pity. He was offering a sword and shield, a fortress, and Juliana knew she'd be a fool to turn it down. The next morning, as promised, Kai's lawyer arrived. She was nothing like the warm, gray-haired types Juliana had pictured. No folksy smiles, no hand-holding. Evelyn Reed looked like she'd been forged in steel. Late 40s. Sharp eyes, severe bob. Her navy suit looked like armor, and she carried a slim black leather briefcase like a weapon. They sat at a glass dining table with a view that swallowed half of Los Angeles. Juliana, dressed in the plain maternity dress Chloe had helped her buy, felt underdressed, overwhelmed, and oddly steady. She told Evelyn everything: the rushed prenup she'd barely skimmed, Daniel's sudden shift, the affair with Elena Cross, the sale of the house, the public disgrace. Evelyn listened silently, hands steepled. No interruptions, no sympathy. What she offered instead was infinitely more valuable: strategy. The prenuptial agreement is solid when it comes to premarital assets like the house, Evelyn began, her voice crisp, efficient. Daniel's father had top-tier legal counsel. However, they made one critical mistake. Juliana leaned forward. A mistake? They focused too much on shielding the initial asset, Evelyn said, her eyes gleaming. But they were sloppy about the appreciation of that asset over the course of the marriage, and even sloppier about the commingling of funds. Juliana blinked. So, I can fight for part of the house? You didn't just live in that home. You hosted his fundraisers, managed the property. You turned it into a social status symbol that benefited him personally and professionally. That's a recognized form of contribution. You have a strong claim to a portion of the increased value. Hope flickered in Juliana's chest for the first time in weeks. But Evelyn wasn't finished. That's just the small game, she said. Her tone turned razor sharp. The real issue here is fraud. Fraud? Juliana asked, breath catching. He sold what could reasonably be argued as a marital home, in spirit and function, without your consent. He says you signed off. Did you? Never, Juliana said, sitting up straight. I would never have agreed to sell that house, especially with the baby coming. Excellent, Evelyn said, allowing herself a thin smile. Then he forged your signature. That's a felony. Juliana's heart pounded. He also liquidated joint investment accounts to fund his little escapade with Miss Cross, Evelyn added. He moved the assets offshore. We've already started tracking the transfers. She snapped her briefcase shut. Daniel thinks he's clever, but he's not. He's just another entitled cheat with a powerful father. For the first time in weeks, Juliana didn't feel weak. She didn't feel broken. She felt like someone who could win. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a plaintiff. In the days that followed, Kai's penthouse transformed into a war room. Evelyn and her team moved like a tactical unit, subpoenaing bank records, digging through offshore transfers, pulling communication logs, and dismantling every financial maneuver Daniel had tried to bury. Juliana watched it all unfold with quiet awe. Each day brought revelations that peeled back more layers of the man she had once trusted. With every document uncovered, she felt the sting of betrayal, sharp and fresh. But she also felt a growing fire within her. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. Meanwhile, Kai remained a steady but distant force, always present, yet never intrusive. Every evening, without fail, he either called or sent a short message. Are you comfortable? Do you need anything? He arranged for a top-tier prenatal nutritionist to consult with her. A certified yoga instructor began visiting twice a week. Her health and the baby's became an unspoken priority. One evening, just after dusk, he joined her on the balcony. The breeze was crisp, and the view of the glowing city below was endless. Why are you doing all this, Kai? Juliana asked softly. I know about my father, and I'm deeply grateful for what he meant to you, but this is more than paying back an old internship. Kai was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on a building across the skyline, the Westbrook Industries Tower, glowing like a monument to arrogance. Your father gave me a chance, he said finally, voice low and distant. But what you may not know is that my family also has a history with the Westbrooks. He turned toward her, his expression darkening. My father was a brilliant engineer, he said. He co-founded a startup with Daniel's father, Richard Westbrook, nearly 30 years ago. They were partners, friends. My dad created a piece of tech that would have changed everything, a patent that should have made them both billionaires. He paused, jaw tight. But Richard was a patient snake. He manipulated the contracts, forced my father out, claimed the patent as his own. Juliana's hand flew to her mouth. He took everything, Kai said, his voice heavier now. My father was ruined, professionally and emotionally. He died of a heart attack a few years later. He was only 51. I had no idea, Juliana whispered. Of course not. They rewrote the story, Kai said bitterly. The Westbrooks loved to act like they built everything themselves, but they built it on betrayal. Juliana stood frozen, the wind teasing strands of her hair, her pulse echoing in her ears. She had thought her betrayal was unique, unimaginable, but now she realized it was just another chapter in a legacy of cruelty, one long overdue for reckoning. "I was a teenager," he continued. "I watched my family lose everything, and I made a vow that I would rebuild what Richard Westbrook destroyed, and one day I would have the power to expose him, to make it all right." He looked back out at the skyline, eyes like steel. "I've spent 15 years building Carter Enterprises to be stronger, smarter, and more unstoppable than anything the Westbrooks could ever imagine." He turned to Juliana, his dark eyes burning with something fierce and resolute. "Daniel's betrayal of you," Kai said, voice low and steady, "isn't just personal. It's systemic. It's the same corruption that's poisoned the Westbrook family for generations, the same arrogance, the same belief that they can hurt people and walk away untouched." He stepped closer. "His mistake wasn't just underestimating you. It was discarding you too quickly, sloppily. In his rush, he left evidence, forged signatures, hidden transfers. These aren't just moral failures. They're crimes, and I intend to give you every resource necessary to see justice served." He paused. "Not just for you, for my father." The puzzle locked into place in Juliana's mind. This wasn't a rescue. This was a reckoning. She wasn't some helpless woman rescued from heartbreak. She was now the unexpected catalyst in a long-brewing war between two empires. Her breath caught as realization settled in her chest like a stone, heavy, undeniable. She was no longer surviving Daniel's betrayal. She was confronting an entire legacy of injustice. And she had power now. Real, formidable power standing beside her in a tailored suit with steel in his voice. That night, Evelyn Reed delivered the first blow. A process server, flanked by 2 Carter Enterprises security officers, strode into a 5-star restaurant in Beverly Hills, where Daniel and Elena were publicly celebrating their new life together in front of half the city's power players. He served Daniel Westbrook a lawsuit, a devastating one. It alleged fraud, forgery, illegal asset transfers, and infliction of emotional distress. It came with a court-ordered injunction to freeze all of Daniel's known assets, personal and corporate, pending investigation. Later that night, Chloe sent Juliana a screen grab of a breaking news alert. Daniel's face was pale, twisted in disbelief and rage. The legal papers were still clutched in his trembling hands. Elena stood frozen beside him, her expression blank with horror. The headline read, "Westbrook heir sued by pregnant wife in explosive fraud case." High above the city, in the quiet safety of the penthouse, Juliana rested her hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, strong, purposeful. She smiled. Small, certain. The battle had begun. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through Los Angeles' manicured elite. It was scandal catnip. The cheating heir, the glamorous mistress, the pregnant wife refusing to be silenced, all backed by a mysterious, unseen powerhouse. Behind closed doors, whispers turned to gasps. Friends who once smiled politely now turned cold, unsure which side to stand on. The old social order was trembling, and Juliana Moore was the unexpected earthquake. In a single day, Daniel's carefully constructed PR narrative of the hysterical, unstable wife was obliterated, replaced with a far more dangerous one. The woman he tried to erase was fighting back. And she wasn't alone. Daniel Westbrook wasn't used to being on the defensive. For decades, the Westbrooks had silenced problems with money and legal intimidation. But this was different. The asset freeze hit like a bomb. His access to the family fortune dried up. Credit cards declined. The renovation on the new house halted. Payments missed, calls unanswered. And Elena, whose affection had always been tangled with status and control, began to unravel. The smug satisfaction on Elena's face faded fast, replaced by a brittle, anxious energy. The romantic getaways were gone. Now there were sharp arguments in luxury hotel lobbies they could no longer afford. But the Westbrook empire was old, calculating, and it had a queen at its core. Vivienne Westbrook, a woman carved from ice, with a smile that never reached her sharp blue eyes. She didn't see Juliana as a wounded ex-daughter-in-law. She saw her as a threat, a commoner holding a billionaire's weapon. And Vivienne had no intention of letting her son lose everything. Not to Juliana, and certainly not to Kai Carter. She decided to handle it herself. One afternoon, as Juliana returned to Carter Tower from a routine doctor's appointment, she was intercepted in the private parking garage. Vivienne Westbrook stood waiting by the elevator, flanked by a stoic man in a dark suit, clearly her personal security. "Juliana," Vivienne said, her voice oozing condescension. Juliana froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "There's nothing to discuss, Vivienne," she replied firmly. "My attorney, Evelyn Reed, handles all communications." "Oh, don't be so theatrical," Vivienne scoffed, stepping deliberately into her path. "Lawyers are for business. This is family." She smiled, a thin, practiced curve of her lips. "I came to appeal to your better nature." Juliana gave a short, bitter laugh. "My better nature?" she echoed. "Where was Daniel's better nature when he forged my name and tossed me out pregnant and homeless?" Vivienne's smile tightened. "Daniel is a passionate man. He made a mistake. But what you're doing now, this vulgar public performance, it's beneath you. You're humiliating the father of your child." "He humiliated himself the moment he committed fraud," Juliana countered, surprised by the steel in her voice, the safety of the penthouse, the calm precision of Evelyn's legal team. It had all reshaped her spine into steel. Vivienne's cool mask began to crack. "Let's be clear," she said, her tone turning sharp. "You're a gold digger. You married my son for his name, and now, with the help of his greatest rival, you're trying to extort him." Her voice dipped into something more vicious. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Kai Carter is using you. He's a predator. And when you're no longer useful in his petty vendetta, he'll throw you away like trash." Juliana didn't flinch. "Kai Carter has shown me more kindness and respect in 2 weeks," she said, "than Daniel did in 5 years. Vivienne's eyes narrowed. "Kindness?" she sneered. "He's locked you up in this glass tower like a pet," Vivienne sneered. "You think this is freedom?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You're a pawn in his little war, a very foolish one." Juliana's spine stiffened, but Vivienne didn't stop. "Drop this lawsuit, take the money we're offering," she hissed. "We'll even sweeten the deal. Something for your trouble. Walk away. Have your baby somewhere quiet where you can't embarrass anyone." Her tone turned cold. "Ruthless. But if you don't, I'll make sure you're destroyed. We'll paint you as an unfit mother. We'll say you had an affair with Carter, that you were unstable, erratic, dangerous." Juliana's breath caught. "We will fight for custody," Vivienne promised, her eyes gleaming with malice. "And I will ensure that child grows up with the Westbrook name, under our roof. Not a penny to you, not a visit, nothing." The threat struck something raw and instinctive. The fear of losing her son, it was more than she could bear. For a moment, Juliana's confidence wavered, and then, ding. The private elevator behind her hissed open. Kai Carter stepped out. He moved with silent purpose like a storm made flesh. He'd been in the security office the entire time, watching every second of the confrontation. Now he was here, solid, calm, lethal. He stepped up beside Juliana, and instantly the air shifted. He towered over Vivienne's security, his quiet force sucking the heat from the room. He stared down at Vivienne with a look of absolute glacial contempt. "Vivienne," he said, voice low and controlled. "I heard every word, as did the high-definition audio and video recorders in this garage." She froze. "My legal team will be adding witness intimidation and coercion to your family's growing list of offenses." For the first time, Vivienne Westbrook looked shaken. She blanched. Kai took a step forward. She instinctively stepped back. "If you, or anyone associated with you, ever comes within 500 feet of Juliana or her child again," he said softly, "I will unleash the full weight of my legal and financial resources. I will not just win, I will bury you." His tone turned icy. "You threatened her child. That makes this personal. I will dismantle everything you built, brick by brick, until the Westbrook name is nothing but a cautionary tale." A beat of silence. "Now get out of my building." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Vivienne's composure shattered. She turned on her heel and fled, her bodyguards scrambling to follow. Upstairs, in the quiet safety of the penthouse, Juliana finally collapsed onto the couch, her whole body trembling, the fear and adrenaline catching up to her. Kai handed her a glass of water. His hands were steady. Hers were not. "She meant it," Juliana whispered, her voice shaking. "She'll try to take my baby." Kai didn't flinch. "She'll try," he said gently, "but she'll fail." His voice was calm, certain. The courts don't look kindly on adulterous fathers who commit fraud, or on families who issue threats to pregnant women, he continued. Vivienne's threat wasn't power. It was desperation. That means we have them cornered. He was right. But it didn't make it easier. Vivienne's attack had cracked open a darker, uglier front in the war. Just as she promised, the Westbrook PR machine roared to life. Tabloid headlines exploded with sensational claims from anonymous sources calling Juliana unstable. Photos of her and Kai, carefully cropped, intentionally misleading, were leaked to media outlets. They were made to look intimate, romantic, strategic. The new narrative was brutal, a scorned wife jumping into the arms of a more powerful man to exact revenge. And the public ate it up. Every time Juliana left Carter Tower for a doctor's appointment, she was swarmed by paparazzi. The stress started eating away at her. Her blood pressure spiked. Dr. Bennett, her OB, warned her in no uncertain terms. No more stress, not if you want a healthy delivery. The penthouse, once a fortress, began to feel like a cage again. Kai saw it happening, and slowly, deliberately, he became a more constant presence. He started joining her for dinner every evening, insisting they talk about anything but the case. Books, art, childhood dreams, what she wanted for her son. In those quiet evenings, the sharp edges inside her began to soften. She found herself laughing again, genuinely. Forgetting, even if just for a moment, the weight of betrayal and headlines. With every passing day, the stranger who'd once lifted her from the sidewalk began to feel less like a savior and more like something steadier. Someone real. And bit by bit, Kai began to open up too. He told her stories about building Carter Enterprises from the ground up, about the betrayals he'd survived, the loneliness, the fire that kept him going. He learned about her love of painting, a passion she had abandoned when she married Daniel. One quiet afternoon, she walked into the spare room of the penthouse and stopped cold. It had been transformed. An easel stood in the center. Canvases lined the walls. Every type of brush, palette, and paint she could imagine was waiting for her. Kai appeared in the doorway. "Evelyn says you need a healthier outlet for stress," he said simply. He paused. "My father's debt is repaid, Juliana. My war with the Westbrooks, that's mine to fight. But helping you..." He looked at her, voice quieter now. "That's become something else." He stepped closer. "It's not about revenge anymore. It's about making sure you and your son are safe and happy." That evening, for the first time in years, Juliana picked up a paintbrush, and as she swept bold color across a blank canvas, she wasn't painting away the pain. She was painting through it, reclaiming a voice, a strength, a self she thought she had lost forever. She was no longer just a pawn or a plaintiff. Juliana Moore was now a creator, a mother, a survivor. And while the Westbrook Empire raged outside the windows of Carter Tower, inside her fortress, she was finally building something of her own. The legal war dragged into the fall. It became a brutal game of attrition, fought not with swords but with motions, depositions, and discovery requests. The Westbrook legal team, a vicious pack of high-priced corporate litigators, did everything in their power to obstruct. They filed motion after motion to lift the asset freeze, dismiss the fraud charges, discredit Juliana as a witness. But Evelyn Reed, unflappable and razor-sharp, knocked each down with surgical precision. The turning point came during Daniel's deposition. It was held in the pristine conference room of Evelyn's downtown office. Juliana was there, on Kai's insistence. "You need to see him without his power," he'd said. Daniel entered the room flanked by two attorneys. He looked thinner, strained. His trademark confidence had curdled into brittle arrogance. He didn't glance at Juliana. Elena Cross was conspicuously absent. According to the tabloids, she'd fled to Europe, her loyalty vanishing as quickly as Daniel's credit line. Evelyn started smoothly, asking basic questions about Daniel's relationship with Juliana, the house, and the sale. Daniel replied with calculated dismissiveness, sticking to his script. Juliana had agreed to the sale. She was just experiencing seller's remorse, manipulated by Kai Carter. Then Evelyn shifted gears. "Mr. Westbrook," she said coolly, sliding a document across the glossy table, "please examine Exhibit A." Daniel took the paper, his expression bored. "This is the final sales agreement for the Bel Air property," Evelyn continued. "Please turn to the last page." He flipped it and nodded smugly. "Yes, that's the document," he said. "That's my signature. And that's Juliana's." Evelyn's voice remained calm. Did you witness Juliana Moore signing this document? Yes, of course, Daniel said smoothly. She signed it in our home office, June 10th, that evening. We were discussing downsizing, focusing on the baby. It was amicable. Juliana felt fury rise like a wave. She'd been at a prenatal class that night, documented, on her calendar, with Chloe, and Evelyn knew it. Her smile was sharp, dangerous. "Thank you, Mr. Westbrook," she said, turning slightly. "I'd like to introduce Exhibit B and Dr. Albert Finch." Evelyn gestured toward a man sitting quietly in the corner, someone Juliana hadn't even noticed before. "This is Dr. Albert Finch," she said. "He's one of the country's foremost forensic handwriting analysts." Dr. Finch gave a small nod. "He's reviewed dozens of samples of my client's signature, on checks, letters, legal contracts dating back years." Evelyn turned to the expert. "Dr. Finch, what's your professional conclusion regarding the signature on Exhibit A?" Dr. Finch adjusted his glasses. "The signature of Juliana Moore on this document," he said, "is a forgery." He let the words sink in before continuing. "It's competent, but still a forgery. There are micro-indicators in the slant, the pressure, and the pen lift behavior that are inconsistent with every verified sample we've reviewed." He glanced at Daniel. "This was created by someone attempting to mimic her handwriting." Daniel's attorney sprang to his feet. "Objection. This is conjecture." "It is admissible testimony in court," Evelyn said coolly, "and perjury in a deposition is a serious offense." Daniel's face drained of color. His arrogance vanished, replaced by raw panic. Juliana felt a chill creep up her spine, not from fear but vindication. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't overreacting. Someone had finally said it, in legal terms, with evidence. She had been wronged, betrayed. And now, the man who thought he could rewrite her story was watching it unravel in real time. But Evelyn wasn't done. She leaned in slightly, voice like a blade. "And that, Mr. Westbrook," she said, "is not your biggest problem." She pulled out another file, a much thicker one, and slid it across the table. "This isn't just about one house, is it, Daniel?" He didn't answer. "This is about a pattern." Evelyn opened the file, letting the silence build. "Let's talk about Project Helix." The name landed like a thunderclap. Daniel went rigid. So did his entire legal team. "Project Helix," Evelyn continued, "is the code name for a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. For 3 years, you and your father have systematically funneled funds from Westbrook Global into this entity, disguising it as R&D expenses. You've been quietly devaluing your own company, with plans to buy it back in a hostile takeover, for a fraction of its worth." She stared at him. "You're stealing billions from your shareholders." Daniel looked like he'd been punched. "Where did you? That's a lie! This is corporate espionage." "No," came a calm, cutting voice from the corner. Kai Carter. He had remained silent until now, but the storm in his eyes had been building. He rose slowly and stepped forward. "It's not espionage," Kai said, voice low and lethal. "It's discovery." He locked eyes with Daniel. "Your mistake was getting sloppy. When you forged Juliana's signature, you turned this into a criminal case. That gave us subpoena power a simple divorce never would have." Kai leaned closer. His words hit like iron wrapped in silk. "We followed the money, Daniel, from the marital accounts you looted, right into your web of offshore shells. And from there," Kai added, "we found something much bigger." "Your Helix accounts," Kai said coldly. He placed a final document on the table. It was a wire transfer confirmation. "And this," he said, voice laced with controlled fury, "is the masterpiece. To hide the money trail, you moved funds from Project Helix to purchase a critical tech patent from a startup. A patent you needed to make the takeover work. But the bank that processed the transfer?" Kai paused, eyes gleaming. "It's owned by Carter Enterprises." The silence in the room thickened. "Every transaction was flagged, Daniel. We have it all. Every wire, every shell company, every falsified board meeting minute, all signed by you and your father." Kai leaned forward, voice like iron. "It's over." Utter silence. Daniel Westbrook stared at the documents. He wasn't just facing a messy divorce anymore. He was staring down federal charges, wire fraud, securities fraud, corporate conspiracy. Years, maybe decades behind bars. He hadn't just sabotaged his own future. He had torched the entire Westbrook legacy, a legacy built on stolen ground. And for the first time, Juliana didn't see a powerful man. She saw a broken one. Not a villain, but a boy. A boy who had been handed everything, and destroyed it with greed. There was no satisfaction in her heart. Only sadness. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. He just slumped into the chair, head in his hands, as his lawyer scrambled in a desperate, whispered conference. The king had been checkmated. The empire had fallen. 2 weeks later, Juliana gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. She named him David, after her father. She delivered in a serene, private suite at the city's most prestigious hospital, a suite Kai had quietly arranged. He was the first person she called after Chloe. When he arrived, it wasn't as a victorious CEO. It was as something softer, something closer. He stood at the edge of the hospital bed, eyes full of quiet wonder, watching the sleeping baby in her arms. "He looks like you," he murmured. "He has your strength." Juliana smiled, exhausted but radiant. The Thorne scandal had exploded across the headlines. Harrison Westbrook was forced to resign amid the SEC investigation. Westbrook Global's stock collapsed. Daniel, in a last act of self-preservation, cut a deal, agreeing to testify against his father in exchange for a reduced sentence. The once mighty Westbrook empire was now a smoldering ruin. Juliana's settlement came swiftly, and it was monumental. But she hadn't taken it from Daniel. There was nothing left to take. Evelyn, under Kai's guidance, had structured the deal so Juliana would become a primary creditor in the Westbrook bankruptcy proceedings. She would rebuild, not off Daniel's fortune, but off the ashes of the empire he tried to bury her beneath. Her settlement didn't come from sympathy. It came from the ashes of the empire that had tried to destroy her. It wasn't alimony, it was justice. Juliana Moore was now independently wealthy. Her future and her son's future weren't secured by any man, but by her own resilience. Holding baby David in her arms, gazing out the hospital window at the glowing skyline, Juliana felt something she hadn't in months. Peace. The storm had passed, the war was won, and from the wreckage, something entirely new was beginning to bloom. Juliana Moore's journey had taken her from the polished heights of Bel Air to the depths of betrayal, and then back again, not to reclaim the life she'd lost, but to build a life of her own making. She had walked through fire, but she hadn't come out burned. She had come out forged into a woman of rare strength, a devoted mother, a brilliant artist, and the master of her own story. Daniel Westbrook's downfall was his own doing, a monument to greed and cruelty. A final lesson that empires built on lies will always crumble. And Kai Carter? He'd started with vengeance in his heart, but in choosing kindness over conquest, he found something far greater: redemption. By helping Juliana rise, he had healed a piece of himself too. What did you think of Juliana's unforgettable journey, from betrayal to empowerment? Did the Westbrooks get what they deserved? So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here, even at this hour? If you are, then maybe, just maybe, this story stirred something in your heart. Maybe it made you feel seen. Maybe it whispered to a part of you that thought it was forgotten. Because this wasn't just a story about betrayal and revenge, it was about rising, quietly, steadily, fiercely. About turning heartbreak into power. About finding your voice in the wreckage of everything you thought you needed. And above all, it's a story about choosing to heal. Juliana didn't walk out of the fire untouched, she walked out transformed. And that's something each of us can hold on to. Life will knock us down. People we trust may betray us. But strength? That's something we build piece by piece, moment by moment, when we choose to stand up again. As the writer Haruki Murakami once said, and once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm is all about. Juliana's storm passed, and in its place, she built a life, not of luxury, but of peace. Not of vengeance, but of truth. So if you're still here, if this story reached you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Not just for the algorithm, but because stories like this deserve to be heard. Because someone else out there might need to hear it too. You're not alone. Not in your pain, and definitely not in your power.